although John was never somebody who would have stood for office in any way, he did serve as a kind of rallying figure.
The main thing that Yoko and I are doing is to change the apathy that all the youth have, especially in America, which has infiltrated to Britain and to France and Germany, everywhere, because still everybody follows the American way of life, because that has the music and the whole style of this century is made by Americans. Now, at the moment, all the youth are apathetic and they think there's nothing to do and it's all over, and they all want to be on speed and junk and just kill themselves. Our job now is to tell them that there is still hope and we still have things to do, and we must get out there and change their heads and tell them it's okay, we can change it. It isn't over just because flower power didn't work. It's only the beginning. We're just in the inception of revolution. We're just the beginning of change.
Everything was moving in a certain direction. You know, it had been moving that way since Bob Dylan sang The Times They Are Changing in 1964. And it was still gathering force and impetus when John lived in America to begin with. And I think it's understandable that the authorities were concerned about what he was up to.
The feeling was that rock and roll, popular music, was overturning all the apple carts, kicking over all the tables. And this made them all very nervous.
Mother, mother, there's too many of you crying. Brother, brother, brother.
They know how to beat people up. They know how to gas them, and they have the arms and the equipment. And the mistake was made that the kids ended up playing their game of violence, you know, and they know how to be violent. They've been running it on violence for 2,000 years or a million or whatever it is. And nobody can tell me that violence is the way after all that time, you know. There must be another way, but a lot of people fell for it. And it's understandable in a way, because when the bully's actually right there, it's pretty hard to say, turn the other cheek, baby.
40 years ago, as we know, you know, a tremendous amount of demonstration, a tremendous amount of political engagement, but leavened with a tremendous sense of optimism, a kind of romantic ideal that we can change the world, that if we stand up, you know, and we are counted, it will make a difference.
Obviously, with Give Peace a Chance, he gave them an anthem. And he made people feel that it was okay to say, I'm for peace, I'm against war.
Give Peace a Chance, like, it's one of the most simplest songs ever, but like such an important statement, and he knew that.
All we are saying is give peace a chance. All we are saying is give peace a chance.
We're going to stay in bed for 7 days, sort of, instead of having a private honeymoon. It's a private protest.
For the violence that's going in the world, you see.
To say,
we feel that instead of making war, it's better to just stay in bed. Let's stay in bed for spring.
and grow your hair. We're artists and not politicians, not newspaper men, and not anything. We're artists. We do it in the way that suits us best. And this is the way we work, and that's the trade I've learned, and I'm using it to the best of my ability.
You could argue that at least keeping the word peace and opposition to war on the front pages and on the news bulletins was better than nothing, but only marginally so, I think. He could have done far more effective things.
We all sit round pointing fingers at Nixon and the leaders of the country saying, he gave us peace or he gave us war. It's our responsibility what happens around the world, in every other country as well as your own. It's our responsibility for Vietnam and Biafra and Israel war and all the other wars that we don't quite hear about. It's all our responsibility, and when we all want peace, we'll get it.
He did have such a huge influence on the youth. Nixon obviously wasn't particularly enamoured with the idea of some little guy from Liverpool coming over and saying things and people taking them as gospel.
The last thing they want is some gobby scouser, you know, turning up demanding that they, you know, they get out of Vietnam and leave everyone alone.
Yeah. What is good for? Absolutely nothing. Yeah. What is good for? Absolutely nothing. Say it again, y'all.
I would rather be a one-term president and do what I believe was right than to be a two-term president and to see this nation accept the first defeat in its proud 190-year history.
The Nixon administration, not just in Watergate, but in other areas, was an incredibly paranoid administration. It used surveillance, it used tapes, it used monitoring as standard procedure. Now, because they were old and because they were out of touch and because they were paranoid and because they were fueled by an especially paranoid FBI, then this meant that they could attempt, quite successfully, to persecute and attempt to silence someone such as John Lennon.
How much interest do you take in the war that is going on in Vietnam now?
Well, we think about it every day, and we don't agree with it, and we think it's wrong. That's how much interest we take. That's all we can do about it, and say that we don't like it.
American young people in their millions turned on their elders, turned on the power brokers and the militarists in the United States. He was unashamed and unembarrassed about his support for the movement.
You could also see how the world view of somebody like J. Edgar Hoover would be so profoundly disturbed.
The FBI kept very extensive files on John Lennon, presumably with the acquiescence of the president, which it might look absurd, but you have to remember that Lennon and the few people who were in a similar position at that time did have enormous influence over not just the affections, but the sort of thought patterns of their audience.
It makes perfect sense that they would be hostile. How far they would go with that hostility, I have no way of knowing.
Vive la revolution!